Okay, so after 6 weeks with 3 different trial dates, court dates, a lot of anxiety, stress, believing God, frustration with Him, but still loving Him in the midst, the case is over. And I am happy to report okay, so first of all, I was joined by a guest here when I sat down to try to record. Check this out. It's so funny. I have chosen really to be purposeful and looking for God with me and Him being with me. And the easiest way to see God is in nature. And I'm not afraid of what you're seeing right now. So I'm just going to choose to believe that that's God with me. Anywho, so after 3 court dates, the first one that you saw after I recorded, it was tough, and thankfully I sent out, and I think I said this in another video, thanks to the prayers of the people that God told me to send prayer requests to, I made it through that first date. The second date was also tough. I thought it would be over at the second date, and it wasn't, but I still made it out trying to not being evicted on that second one. The third one was just a couple days ago, and the night before I went in, God was like, okay, this one is it. This is it. And I was like, okay, so how we coming out of this? Because you made a promise that I wouldn't be evicted, but it's sure enough looking like that's what's about to happen. And one of the things that stood out to me in this process was on the second court date, I went and I ran into a young lady who was going through exactly what I was going through, and we chatted for a moment, and it turned out that she was struggling just like I was struggling, and I shared some stuff with her, and she ultimately ended up being very, very encouraged. I showed her some of the verses that my kind of prayer team, soldier team, had for me, and it encouraged her and really ministered to her. And so even though the second date didn't come out the way that I wanted it to, I felt like what happened was supposed to happen, and I felt fulfilled because I felt like I did what God told me to do, even in the midst of the garbage, right? Third court date, I go in, and like I said, the night before, God said it was going to be okay. Third date, I go in, and long story short, they settled. My landlord was like, listen, I will pay you to leave. I will pay you to leave. You don't have to pay any of the back rent. Forget it. Just forget all of it. I will give you what you would have paid in 1 month's rent. I will give that to you if you leave. And what's so funny is that throughout this process, God had been saying it's time to go. But I didn't want to leave because fear, what I'm paying in rent, is quite cheap considering the apartment that I have and where I live. And so leaving would mean trusting God to find a new place in a short period of time that I can afford. And I didn't feel like going through all that. But God kept saying it's time to go. And He had been saying it through different streams, avenues, different ways that He's spoken to me. He said it to me directly. He said it to me through something that I saw on television. He said it through something that I heard in passing. It was time to go. So the fact that this guy said, bump all the rent, forget all of that, you don't have to pay me a dime, I will give you 1 month's rent to leave. I was like, okay. But here's the clicker. Here's the clicker. My thing with God is He made a promise that I would never be evicted. And I know what He said. So I had some legal help, not an actual attorney, but legal counsel that would meet me there and kind of guide me through the process. And so as we're doing the paperwork, I said to him, so does this mean that, when people ask if you've ever been evicted, I have to tell them that I was being evicted. He said, no, you are not being evicted. You're being paid to leave. This will never go on your record. I was like, oh, wait. God kept his promise. Although it feels like it was on a technicality, but at the end of the day, God kept his promise. So here's the situation. Here's what's so weird. Here's the lesson. Here's what I think God wants to get through to me and maybe to whoever's watching. God always keeps his promises. However, it hardly ever looks like what we think it's supposed to look like, what we expect it to look like, how it may have worked out in the past, or how it may have worked out for others. Your situation is specific to you and whatever God is trying to teach you through what you're going through. And so if you've been following this journey, you know that I have been praying and begging God, listen, pay all this rent so I can be done. When the whole time God was like, I'm not going to do that because it's time for you to move. I'm doing a new thing. So then it becomes a thing of, well, if that's the case, you still made a promise. So how you going to keep your promise? It's none of my business. When you're asking God how he's going to keep his promise, it's none of his business. Because the reality is, his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. There is no possible way that we can always understand how he's going to do things. So, God was faithful. God kept his promise. And now we are in a space where I have to find a place in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks. Okay, God. Next thing.